Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin.
Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored, where tech leaders drop the filters and just tell it like it is. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, serial tech entrepreneur, published author of the Amazon bestseller Fail Hard, Win Big, and CEO of Sonatify Technology, a nearshore software development company. Today, I am joined by Ken Johnson, a security consultant and engineering pro, a multi-time CTO, and now CTO and co-founder at Dry Run Security. Ken, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
You bet. All right. I love the story on how you got your current gig. So I'm going to let you tell it.
Yeah, I was at GitHub. I was managing a few teams on the software security side of the house. And James Wickett, who I'd met, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 years previously, and I maintained a relationship with, he had reached out to me. He had mentioned that he had a company he was thinking about starting, and he had an idea. And the idea was for a dynamic scanner. So something that's been around for a while, that's been probably a few decades that we've had that around. His idea was to make it really quick. And if you're not familiar with the dynamic scanner, you put a URL in and you point it at a website and tries to find some security vulnerabilities. And basically at that point, having, worked with all manner of tools inside of AppSec and, living and breathing it, I respectfully and politely told him that was not a good idea. We should definitely not go down that route. However, if he was, here are some tweaks he could make and some thoughts I had on it. And we
I love
kept
it.
talking. He didn't get upset or anything. He took that, in kind. And here we are now, 3 years
I
later.
love it. So you have been the CTO and co-founder of Dry Run Security for almost 3 years now, right?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah.
Tell us about Dry Run Security and what you do.
Yeah. So we're a software security product for the modern era. Developers for too long have dealt with these alerts that aren't very helpful, that aren't very accurate. And, it gives them work that they may or may not have to actually go and do. And they don't know whether or not they actually have to go and do that. There's no confidence in those types of results. And it's not a system you can communicate with and get much help from as a developer. You still would have to reach out to a person. And we know people don't scale. So we're modernizing that approach. We're giving them something that's far more accurate, that provides better recommendations that they can communicate with. And on the security side, we're giving them total visibility into their application security program, and we're amplifying them like crazy. So you turn one person into 100. That's our real mission.
I
right
love
now.
it. Tell us about some current projects you're working on.
Oh, where to begin? Yeah. So we just launched, one of the things that's interesting is we just launched a product called Deep Scan. And Deep Scan's a foray into scanning a full source code base for security flaws. So what I mean by that is, you probably think, well, isn't that what you're already doing? It's not. Our first focus was to really nail down pull request reviews or merge requests. So changes before they enter the code base, change management, essentially. That was our primary goal. And that's actually a really hard thing to do. What's actually easier, believe it or not, is the full repo scanning. Now, people don't always want to do full repository scanning. If you've had a code base and it's been tested a bunch, it's been sitting around, it's helpful to scan it. But what people the situation for them was they would run, maybe we'll say 3 different types of scanners of the old guard, and they always find the same things that those types of scanners are going to find. And what's been interesting for them is they've been running, we've been beta testing this new full repo scanner. And when they run it through, they realize they've got flaws that neither their consultants ever told them about, which is pretty interesting for us, that human beings couldn't find these flaws. And obviously none of those old style scanners found them. So that's been a new focus for us recently. We're coming out of beta. It's been a really fun project.
Excellent. Well, certainly with the rise of AI assisted tools to help engineers, I think there's more need than ever to make sure the right scans are being done and making sure that code that's being produced in conjunction with the engineer, that people aren't getting lazy and forgetting certain things with the advent of this code assisted tools that are helping engineering teams.
Yeah, we're seeing far more complex flaws getting introduced into the code bases just because of like what you're saying. You have more velocity of code shipping, but you have more complex risks being introduced because of it. So
That's
AI,
interesting.
it's been good and it's been bad for folks. It's not without its flaws for sure.
Interesting. Well, tell us about your software engineering team. How many engineers you have, where they're located, and the work model you guys like to follow.
Yeah. So, and I take a different approach with software engineering. So there's a philosophy where you could go and build an army of junior, essentially engineers headed by a couple senior folks. That's something I've seen folks do. Another strategy I've seen folks use is, well, hey, we have a lot to build, so let's go and outsource to a company, usually overseas, but sometimes in the States. The way we work is I set it up such that every person that joined the team was the best at what they do. So we have somebody who was offered a scholarship to MIT and turned it down in favor of doing back end performant game development. We have another person who has both a massive amount of software security experience, but also surprisingly, because it is so new, from the beginning was working with LLMs. So he's got that experience, and so on and so forth. But we also use a blend of a couple senior contractors. But this is a contracting company that, um, we had several very reputable companies send our way, and I introduced the contractors one at a time. Just small amount of change, and I don't want to say thrash, but definitely every time you introduce a new person to the team, there are new considerations. So when you have a small team, and we're probably talking less than 8 people, accomplishing so much, you really need everybody to fire on all cylinders and work well
Definitely.
together. That's my philosophy.
And are you guys a remote company, hybrid? What kind of approach are you doing there?
We are remote first. Yeah, that was at GitHub. I learned some lessons about remote first work since they are so good at being remote first. They're really a model that I'd like to follow and have been. So you focus on really well written dialogue because writing becomes everything when you're in different time zones. You have different expectations about communication in terms of instantaneous replies. That's not necessarily a good thing. It's not even something you should really expect if people are working in different time zones and they're in flow mode. And there's all kinds of other little things that you can do to make remote first work better.
And so are all of your engineers working off the same time zones?
No, definitely not. So we're spread from West Coast to East Coast. Yeah. And all
Okay.
everywhere in between.
So that's relatively close as opposed to having people offshore or other municipalities. I guess I consider same time zone within the 3 hour variances of Pacific versus Eastern time.
That is fair. Yeah. Okay. That's fair. Yeah. No, but they're all within the states. Yeah. West Coast, East Coast.
Excellent. So I know you have some strong views of the future of software development. Share some of those if you would.
Yeah. I guess that's where to begin. That's a really great question. I think the first place I would start is just not even from a security perspective, just watching how things are sort of changing. I've been in the Ruby and Ruby on Rails community since, I don't know, 2007 maybe. I've seen a lot of changes. Now it's almost 20 years.
And everybody thought Ruby would die, and it's still in
Still
there and
going.
strong.
It's still going strong. But some of its leaders have made some good points. So I think about Chad Fowler. If you know who Chad Fowler is, he was a prominent figure and is a prominent figure in the Ruby and Ruby on Rails community. And he made a good point, which was we used to guard and hold to our chests and have debates and uh, really we were very opinionated about our language, about our syntax, about the strengths and the pros and the cons. And now we're in a situation where, with especially the advent of vibe coding, and I was just at a vibe coding conference last week, AI DevCon in New York, and it became very clear that that's very true. It's sort of when I have something that I can talk to that can help me build the software very, very quickly that I'm interested in building, at that point, it becomes more of a consideration of what is from a utilitarian perspective, what is the best thing to accomplish this goal? Not necessarily, culturally feels the best, or whatever other consideration you're using, because you don't need to necessarily be an expert in that language. You need to have an approximation of understanding what it's doing, but you can use a vibe coding to build software very, very quickly. And I guess going further, that code becomes very easy to build, which means it's usually very easy to throw away. So that's one thing that I would say, just my first point. And I don't know what you think about this, but
Well,
I think
so
it's
let me
changing
ask you about that. So vibe coding has absolutely revolutionized the ability to put prototypes together quickly. What used to take months, if not longer, and sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars can now be done in hours or days. But, what is your opinion on the viability of taking something you create via vibe coding and making that enterprise level software?
Yeah, that's my feeling on that, is that you really require, you're going to have people that still understand what they're looking at, right? So it's not, I'm saying this because I had a conversation at a dinner where a CTO had said, I'm actually hiring mostly junior people because junior people are better suited for this AI native world. They're more or less resistant. It's easier for them to get up to speed. And for senior folks, they're more resistant as well at that time. Anyways, this was maybe like 6 months ago. And my thinking is, you still need senior folks to go and do those, not only reviews of what's being shipped, but also just proper design, right? I mean, we still have design specifications we should be adhering to. We should still be holding those sessions where we talk about best ways to ship software. And to make it enterprise ready, obviously, robust testing is something that all of us know is incredibly important, but also being enterprise ready is, there's more than just, I don't know, supporting on-premise systems or this, that, or the other. There's a lot that goes into making something that is considered enterprise ready, we'll say.
I,
So
uh, I often have a hard time with non-technical leaders explaining the good and the bad of vibe coding and helping them understand that you can't vibe code something and put it in production in days or even weeks. That they're trying to help them understand um, the complexity of making that into a reliable software solution. Man, it cuts down months and months, if not more, because last time I checked, every engineering team works much better off a working prototype that shows function, shows what, the goals. But what's your take?
I think you're right. It helps you get off the ground and get it. I used to like this phrase at GitHub: demos, not memos. It's one of my favorite phrases. Just ship it, because once you ship something, then other people can see visually what you're going after and just contribute to. And oftentimes that initial prototype becomes the thing that you all build off of. So I think that you're right. I think that's really, really great. The problem is that when you produce a lot of code, right? So let's say, I don't know, I had it vibe code up a 3,000 line file that is some utility class that's responsible for some important things. We'll say, well, what happens when later I ship that code, didn't necessarily understand every line and review every line of what was going on? How could I? Something else wrote it. I'm going for speed. How do I diagnose that bug when I then ask AI to help me diagnose the bug and it stumbles? What happens then? And
Exactly.
that definitely happens today. And I don't know if that'll happen forever, but for sure, for right now, that is still an issue where you can't lean completely on. So I'm just saying, if you're having something write everything for you, that is the downside. It's harder to troubleshoot. Ask me how I know.
We've all learned that the hard way, right?
Exactly. Some of these lessons are hard learned lessons, we'll say. And we're learning
What
them
are
through.
other thoughts you have on the future of software development and where things are going?
Well, it's definitely, it's taking away gates. It's allowing more and more people to develop software. Obviously, I have all the same concerns that everybody else does, right? Like, how does the economy look in this world? I mean, everything from our students who are, in school for computer science, is this still a viable field? The most viable field to enter into? I have lots of questions.
Especially when most universities won't teach AI assisted tools because it conflicts with their ethical codes. And I've had CTOs of large universities on this podcast, and they're as frustrated as can be because employers are saying we want smart computer science grads already trained on AI, and universities are still trying to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, and I want, I wonder about the academic structure here, how much longer that how much longer it keeps its, at least for computer science, how much longer it keeps its value, I should say. And not to say that I question the value of education, but I do see a world in which the barriers are coming down, and you don't necessarily need to have gone through formal training or formal academia. And that means that in theory there should be a much larger supply of developers, and will there be as much demand? I think there's a lot of, and also you notice, I mean, I've noticed, and I'm curious if you feel the same. I've seen frontier models also trying to capture some of the most successful business models falling out of usage of their products. So that's another interesting kind of dynamic that's sort of happening under the scenes, or at least I don't know if you feel the same way.
Well, expand on that.
Well, so you see, like, for instance, I'm trying to think about OpenAI's recent foray into different business models. There was Brave, or excuse me, I said Brave, um, Atlas rather, Atlas, the browser. I've had Aardvark, which is a direct competitor to my business. They have video, right? They've created video content. This is presumably going to hurt creators potentially, or maybe it helps them. I don't know the ramifications. I mean, I'm not smart enough to speak to everything that could happen next, but I do see them just sort of throwing. I'm not just saying OpenAI. I see it with all of the frontier models where they're like, here's a new business model. Here's a new business model. We're going into another business model, and yeah, I don't know. It's just the whole ecosystem, especially the economic bits around this, are the things that I'm struggling to. Yeah, I'll just say I'm struggling to understand where it's going to go and what all the ramifications are going to be.
My 2 cents on that is that there's very few things out there that have removed the need for the human in the loop. There's with software development, we've seen some great tools to help productivity. But after having over 160 CTOs like yourself on my podcast, we kind of get to drill past the hype and what's real. And at least what I'm seeing is engineering teams that are able to adopt good tools are seeing productivity in the 10 to 20% range, not, replacing hundreds of engineers and who are embracing it. I think it's a shift of roles. I certainly think there's professions like content writing that AI has, done a good job of being able to minimize how much you're using for third parties on that. I don't know. I still haven't seen anything that's replaced the human in the loop need to make sure you're producing top-notch stuff, whether it's content, whether it's videos, whether it's software.
I agree. I don't think anything has fully replaced humans, and I don't really expect it to. I do think so. When I think about the benefits from a security side, it's obvious. I mean, we've talked about developer productivity, which is, yeah, of course, it's useful, and you see plenty of productivity gains, and it's been helpful for us for sure. I would say it's more realistic. It's what you're saying. It's maybe a 20, 25, maybe as high as 30%, but I wouldn't go farther than that. And on the security side of things, like what we're seeing is an amplification of the human being. So we have always had in application and product security an issue with supply. There are never enough people to do this job. If you are a team of, say, 3 or 4 highly qualified application security pros or software security pros, you actually have a fairly large team. And that could be 4 people for 800 developers. So there's a lot of code shipping you can't review at all. And the job requires more than that. There's, helping with design, helping with digging into whether or not something's an incident. Maybe somebody reports a security flaw, keeping up with the things that keep you compliant with SOC 2, whatever it is. There is always far too much work for the individual in this role. So this is the first time I've seen something come along that can actually help that person achieve their goals and help secure the org and address being 4 people to 800 developers. So I'm very excited. I think it's far more than 20 or 30% for them. I mean, I'd say it could go as high as 70 to 80% in the near future.
And it's definitely, but by the time this episode airs, all this could change. We're
Yeah.
in a rapidly changing world, to say the least. What are, on a different note, Kev, what are some things that might be slowing down your engineering team right now? And what have you tried or what's working best or not working to fix those things?
Wow, that's a really great question.
Kind of my job as host is to come up with some good ones.
I know it's a tough question, but it's a great question because I have some opinions there. I'm just trying to think of which one makes the most sense to share. Probably, I think communication would be the. I know that's probably very common, but that's actually been a huge unlock is communication earlier on in projects. So essentially, every project consists of probably three or four different groups, meaning even though we've only got a small team, we've got folks who handle the API, the UI user experience end of things, our AI side of the house, and our orchestration. All four have to be involved. There are times where some things that we're working on do not seem like they necessarily require other folks within the group. And I think that's been a huge unlock for us is just from the very get-go, get everyone involved and be very this is more of a human thing, a soft skill, but be okay with asking questions. What I found was in security, we ask questions constantly. That's literally in our blood, right?
Right.
It's in our DNA. We have to, if that we didn't have that curiosity, we wouldn't uncover all the flaws that we uncover. We wouldn't do the things we do. Developers, on the other hand, and it's interesting because I live in both worlds, developers feel less secure in asking those types of questions. To them, that's almost like saying or being vulnerable in a way. And I try it with the team, and I think this is something we really focused on is to say, no, that is wrong. You are going to slow us down. You're going to take more time. You're going to make even greater mistakes. You need to be comfortable with saying, I don't know. If you can't say that, then you don't belong on the team. You have to be okay saying, I don't know, and I need help. So that's been, I think, again, it's probably not anything revolutionary, but that's a big one for us. That's very
No, and that's very valid. And, we all go through meeting paralysis and being on a lot of Zoom calls, and you're always weighing out those things. And so I think that is a great one. And
thank
any
you.
other ones come to mind?
Some are technical in nature. I
That's
can
all
go
right.
into it a little bit.
This is a software engineering podcast.
I made okay, I'll just say it. We made the choice to use lambdas to back our API. I think it's okay in some scenarios, but as you grow, especially you made a comment or you had a question related to like going from the product you've built into the enterprise, right? And actually making
Mhm.
that something that's enterprise ready. And that's the thing that becomes a bit tougher when you've started off in this sort of microservice lambda back way. It scales, but it's harder. I would argue it's harder to run locally. It's harder to do your testing. It's harder to get things through the pipeline. So it's not that it isn't amazing and it doesn't scale and it's not performant, but there are trade offs when it comes to trying to move quickly and nimbly. So that's another challenge, although silly and trivial for all the challenges you would think that we face.
No, I actually think that's a great one. I think that's a great one. On a different side, so are there any tools or workflows that your team has adopted this past year that has a good measurable change?
I would say the two biggest ones are Warp. So it's a terminal backed, AI backed terminal, I should say. That has been insanely useful. If you think about how we used to manage with, let's say we're building a new app, you need to install it on your machine. And I don't know, you run into a package or a library that won't install. And you start to go down that rabbit hole. And what did we always do? We went to Stack Overflow and we would look at Stack Overflow for various bits of advice to try and use the right commands and figure out what people were dealing with and or how they were dealing with the scenario and yada yada yada. It took a long time. Well, what's amazing is with Warp, I can tell somebody, hey, go ahead and install this. And if they run into an issue, Warp will just kick off the triage. It will do, I mean, I've yet to run into a situation where Warp could not fix whatever the thing is that the person couldn't install. And they don't have to do virtually anything. And it's seconds that we're talking about. Yeah,
Nice.
a minute, So that's been really, really helpful. I think the other thing too, just for developing softwares, we've been a really big fans of Windsurf internally. I know folks have preferences with Copilot versus Cursor, Windsurf, and Claude Code. Most of our team enjoys Windsurf. Some of our team enjoys Claude Code, so we employ both. Both are very helpful for us.
Gotcha. Have you run into challenges with code when different team members are using different AI backed tools like Windsurf and Claude?
I probably have a funny story for you.
All
We
right.
have genius.
What I tell you to start with, our rules are we can't be boring, we can't be boring, and we can't be boring. Funny story. I love it.
Well, then you're going to love this one. Yeah, no. And I want to be clear, this developer I'm talking about, she is literally a genius. I mean, very, very smart, but she is dyslexic. And so she had misspelled the word process and put two C's in to the word process. And not a big deal because only a couple of people working on the API, not a big deal. We introduced vibe coding, and overnight, while we were trying to vibe code things up, uh, it rewrote some significantly important parts of the code base. Luckily, our testing caught it to correct the word process and basically do a spell check across the code base, but not everywhere. So there were these weird things that it broke, and it took us a second to figure out, like, why are these tests failing, in these weird ways, in these weird places? And then, you sort of realize, oh, AI is trying to be too clever and fix our mistakes. You need to call that function by that name. That's very important. So I don't know, made me laugh. I thought it was a
No,
funny story.
that's very interesting. And touch on that. So, a developer who's genius level, but has some level of being dyslexic, how do you overcome that?
I don't know how she does it, what her personal strategies are, to be frank, but I think she's just very careful. I think that's, we do reviews, right? Not just code, not just automated reviews, but we have some very senior people who do some. So the way you prevent against that, to be clear, is proper testing, good thorough reviews. Those are always critical, and then I'm sure she has her own strategies for dealing with that as well. But other than that, other than AI being introduced, it's really not been an issue.
Okay, excellent. What about, have you guys, you talked about the impact of bringing new engineers on the team. Have you guys figured out an onboarding routine for new engineers that gets them productive very quickly?
Yes, we have. So we have them work on something small right away, given the domain that they're. So we've had two contractors, one for UI UX and one for an API. So besides, all the things of getting them all the stuff that you do for onboarding with indoctrination material and all that fun stuff, we try to just straight up right away pair with them and have them build something. For us as a startup, every day counts. I always say what is months or years for bigger companies are days and weeks for us. And so they have to, frankly, I think we're within 3 days, we have a developer up and writing code and their machine going. So that's on average.
Okay, that's good. That's good. How do you handle, Ken? You guys are a fast coming startup. You guys have some strong initial seed investors. How do you go about explaining whether it's AI or risks or timeframes to non-technical leaders to help them understand? Because that's probably the AI hype's out there, and sometimes you got to bring people back to earth of what's really possible. How do you go about that?
Yeah, I think the outcomes are what I focus on when I have to have those I say have to have when I have those conversations. I do focus on outcomes. So if an outcome that matters, it depends on who you are. If you're an investor, your outcomes are probably more of, what's the market cap in this space? What's the market look like? Who are your competitors? What's your cost of operating and margins and, things like that. Those are the things they tend to care about. Yeah, they want product vision, and it depends obviously on the investor. Some folks, the investor crowd, some folks are very in the weeds. They've done this before, meaning software security before, and it's not their first foray into it. And others are, they're just investing in a business and they want to know how that business is going to go. And so product vision needs to stay kind of high level. When I talk to leaders though, like especially C-suite, chief information security officer, CTO types, we talk about, what are your challenges today? Usually it's what are you dealing with? What are you concerned with? And then really working back from there on how we can help them. We have 4 major product lines, so there's usually something we can do with at least 2 out of 4 of them to solve those challenges. But yeah, it's a lot of I would say listening first, because I have in the past had a bad habit of, kind of going off on a tangent on what I thought was important and what I thought resonated, but I didn't do a good job of qualifying up front what they were concerned about. So that's usually how I handle it.
Excellent. Well, Ken, thank you so much for getting uncensored with us today. You provided some great insights and background into the security world, into how to go about opportunities and how your team is approaching engineering and security. Excited to see where you continue to rise your company here. Before we wrap, what's some no BS advice you have for today's tech leaders who are trying to build, scale, or even just survive in these interesting times?
Well, if you're going to use AI, try to put some guardrails around it. You asked that question about how do we deal with increasingly complex code. Even my developer who has, dyslexia. There are ways you can prevent against these things, security things, and others through guardrails that you place. Like just a concrete example of this for right now, just to keep it brief. Think of like a Claude.md file or any of these other type of like a cursor file where that context is used to infuse the analysis being performed or the work being performed and get you not drifting away from good. So that would be a real big consideration if I was in other people's works.
Excellent. Ken, thank you so much. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. If you enjoyed the show, go ahead and hit subscribe. Remember to fail hard, win big, and always build what matters. See you next time.
That's a wrap. Another great episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun doing this show. I love talking with great tech leaders. As a side note, if you're interested, check out my new book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is the story of how I built 30 companies, failed on 20, and turned 10 into multi-million-dollar wins. The common thread with all of them was custom software. Also, if you need software development help out there, my company, Sonatify Technology, we deliver world-class software development engineers out of Latin America. We have a solid track record of helping companies launch better products and faster. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it and appreciate you.